Ich begrüße Sie zu unserem zweiten Vortrag von heute Nachmittag, besonders auch die virtuell dabei sind und die ich jetzt nicht wirklich erkennen kann, aber das ist natürlich heutzutage eine gute Möglichkeit, auch die zu erreichen, die nicht anreisen konnten. Ja, nachdem wir heute gestartet sind in unserem nördlichen Nachbarland in Deutschland, machen wir jetzt noch einen Schritt ein bisschen Richtung Nordwesten, Richtung Holland. Die Firma Ziuz ist mir schon länger Zeit bekannt als Lieferant in diesem Umfeld. Damals ging es noch mehr etwas um Hardware-basierte Lösungen. Heute geht es um etwas anderes. Es geht nämlich um das Thema Kinderschutz oder wie man auf Englisch Child Abuse sagen würde. Und bei diesen Themen sind wir, glaube ich, alle, die damit sich beschäftigen müssen, froh um technische Unterstützung, um das Problem effizienter und effektiver lösen zu können. In diesem Zusammenhang gibt es ein EU-Projekt, ein Forschungsprojekt, und hier ist die Firma Ziuz dabei. In diesem Zusammenhang freut mich sehr, Jos Fluri, Executive Vice President auf Ziuz, begrüßen zu dürfen. Er wird uns berichten über dieses Projekt. Er wird das in Englisch tun. Verstehen tut er sehr gut Deutsch, aber er wird auf Englisch tun. Und wer noch eine Übersetzung gern haben möchte auf Deutsch, der sollte sich jetzt gerade noch einen Kopfhörer beschaffen. Wir haben den Übersetzer, der sonst für nichts arbeitet, sozusagen. Gut, darf ich Ihnen die Bühne übergeben? Vielen Dank.
Yeah, first of all, my apologies that I have to do this in English. If I did it in German, probably nobody would understand, so I think your hearing English is better than my speaking German. My name is Fluri. That's a Swiss name, actually. Doesn't exist in the Netherlands. And some digging in the past learned that we fled from Switzerland to the Netherlands as Huguenots, but that's a long time ago. Switzerland is way more attractive now. So, Ziuz, company in the northern part of the Netherlands. We are specialized in visual intelligence, and with that we mean using traditional algorithms, using artificial intelligence to get intelligence from images and videos. And we do that in the medical world, we do that in the pharmaceutical world, and we do that in the forensic world. And my responsibility is the forensic activities we have. We work mainly for law enforcement, but also for NGOs that are active in the field of fighting child abuse. So the crime area we work on is fighting child abuse. And unfortunately, that is a very serious and widespread crime. We work for a number of Swiss police forces, German police forces, amongst others. So what I'm going to talk about today is not one of our commercial projects. It's a project we run, as Danielle already said, with EU money, with a number of project partners. We're one of the project partners, and I will talk a little bit about this project. But before I start, a question to you. Are there police people in the audience that work in fighting child abuse? Only one. Does anybody know what the NCMEC report is? Only one. Oh, more. Okay, so I will do a little bit of explanation about that because it's important for the context, I think. So, Project AviaTor. AviaTor stands for Augmented Visual Intelligence and Targeted Online Research. So we investigate images and videos, we look online for additional information, and we prepare that information for the police to use in their investigation. So the AviaTor project is about processing NCMEC reports using AI. Well, a little bit of context. In America, there's a law that makes it mandatory for providers like Facebook, like Google, like Twitter, also the ones that Robert already mentioned, to report if they see illegal content on their platforms. What does that mean? That means, for instance, if I, as a Facebook user, I upload an image that represents illegal content, child abuse, that Facebook will check that image. Facebook checks all the images and videos that are uploaded. They use hash matching technology. They use AI classifiers to classify those images and videos. And they have content moderators. And if Facebook concludes that what I've uploaded is illegal, they are by law they have to report to NCMEC. And NCMEC is the clearinghouse that was appointed by the American Senate to receive all these reports. Okay, so then my report and what that report is, I will explain in a little bit. So there's a lot of these reports. There's about, in 2021, there were 30 million. 30 million reports that contained about 100 million illegal images and videos. It's an enormous amount. Of those reports, about 1 million are from American users, but the remaining 29 million are from users all over the world. NCMEC doesn't do anything with these reports. They check the IP addresses, they do a geolocation, and they forward them to the law enforcement in that specific country. So the Dutch police gets about 50,000 of these reports. German police gets 200,000. Indian police gets 1 million. And it's impossible for law enforcement to process all these reports. So they start at the first report, and when time is up, they stop. That's the unfortunate situation. The result of that is that if there is somewhere down the line a report with an ongoing abuse situation that requests a lot of priority, it might never be seen. So what we try to do with the AviaTor project is, first of all, to automate as much as possible of the processing of these reports, and in the processing to prioritize them so that the police does the most important ones first. And we use, amongst other things, AI for that. So that's a NCMEC report. NCMEC is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in America. They forward all these reports to local law enforcement. So what is a report? A report actually is a readable PDF file, because there's also police forces that don't have computers yet. Might sound a little bit strange, but they have to read these reports by hand or from a screen. So they have the PDF for that. And then together with the PDF, there's the XML file that contains all the data, like IP addresses, nicknames, phone numbers, email addresses, and there's the files that were uploaded. So it's always a lot of personal information about reported person, plus the illegal content is actually the report. Can also be chat logs and other information, and it differs a little bit from provider to provider. I must say Facebook is important. They're a very good reporter. Of the 30 million, I think 22 million reports come from Facebook. And it's hard to imagine that there are still people that upload child abuse images as a profile photo, but that's the case, unfortunately. So in this project, we interviewed a lot of police organizations, 24, and we asked them, how do you process these reports? What do you do if a report comes in? And from that, we kind of came up with a logical workflow on what the police does with these reports. First of all, if a report comes in, it's important to identify whether it contains illegal content. Second of all, you have to identify if the person that's being reported, in my example, it was me, if I'm identifiable. So if my IP address can be converted in a street address, all those things. If both things are true, then the officer that sees the report has to decide, am I going to process this report? Is it serious enough? And sometimes they don't, but if for the third time a report on me comes in, they say, oh, now it's serious enough, so now I have to start processing this. So, and if it's going to be processed, then most of all, reports are grouped together based on the material, based on telephone numbers, etc., into an investigation. Once the investigation is done, so the police has reviewed the Facebook pages, have get the street address for the IP address, then they have to decide, is this going to be a case? And if it's a case, what mostly happened is that the investigation data is handed over to the regional force where the perpetrator is living, and they decide whether they're going to get a search warrant, knock on the door, confiscate all the data they find, and start a real case. So that's very, in simple words, the workflow for the police in processing these reports. So these industry reports are major items for the police where they base their investigations on. So in AviaTor, we cover this process and we focus on the first part, and I will explain how that works. So first of all, we check if we can conclude that something is illegal. So in AviaTor, you can configure hash sets that contain hashes of known illegal content, known illegal files, and we match with those hash sets. That's the first step. And we do that with an exact match, MD5, SHA-1 for your information. So if that matches, you know it's exactly the same material, and also the prosecutor will accept that it is the same material. Then if we can't find an exact match, we do a fuzzy match, photo DNA, Microsoft Photo DNA. So we see if there's comparable photos. And if that doesn't work, we use an AI classifier. So we have trained an AI classifier on illegal content to identify if an image, it is likely that an image contains illegal content. You heard from Robert, they train classifiers themselves on the data sets they have. We unfortunately can't do that because it's illegal material and it can only be used, it can only be done in the police environment. So we instruct the police to train the classifier, and then we use the classifier in the system. For videos, we also match videos. We do that with F1. So we see if parts of a videos are known, and we make summaries of videos so that they can be quickly reviewed by an investigator. To check if somebody is identifiable, we check retention times. How long can we, for an IP address, still get the street address from the internet provider? In the Netherlands, you have 8 months for that, or 9 months. In Sweden, it goes down to 0 days. So you must act very quick if you want to know where the person lives that is reported. We check and match email addresses, telephone numbers, usernames, nicknames, etc. We also check if the account is still online, so that is important information for the police because they know they can get more information. And we also find accounts with the same username on other platforms. For instance, with the Facebook name, we try to find corresponding LinkedIn accounts to see what somebody's profession is, for instance. So the AI classifier we use, we run when we don't have matches because it's kind of an expensive operation. So we do that if we have material that is unknown. So for the targeted online research, we do a number of things. We try to find occupations on LinkedIn. The police knows by experience which occupations have a high risk of being in contact with children, for instance, with risk of abuse. We check if there's children's photos in the Facebook profile photos. We do a keyword search on the profile, on the chat logs, to see if there's any text related to child abuse. And what we also do, we check known darknet hotspots where pedophiles come together if a person is active on a hotspot like that. So that's what we all do automatically before an investigator even looks at the report. And then with that information, we basically calculate a risk score. And if we have calculated a risk score, we can sort the reports based on that score to make sure that the investigator starts with the most important report first. Well, I can talk a lot about risk scores, but I'll give you an example. Say a report comes in, there's a lot of photos in, there's no photos that match with a known illegal database, but the classifier says there's a high likelihood that this material is illegal. That is a big trigger for the police because they know it's new material because it's not in their databases. So it might be an ongoing abuse situation. And if you combine that then with other things you find in the OSINT, you create a very high risk score. And then you know that that report is at the top of the pile and will be handled first. So to step back to the workflow, so what the system does, NECMEC has a web API where the police collects all the reports that are meant for them. We connect automatically to that web API, so at night we download all the reports, and then in the morning all the pre-processing is done. So when the investigator opens the report, he sees the risk score, he sees whether there were matches, he has all the OSINT we collected, and he can make an informed choice on whether to process that report or not. That's in essence the main function of AviaTor. So we do that with a number of partners. We are not the only partner in the project. We work with the Belgian police, with the Dutch police. They have a big influence on the project and what we're doing. We work with InHope as the association of internet hotlines. We have 2 technology companies in the project. Ziuz, doing the visual intelligence, and WebIQ, another company in the northern part of the Netherlands that does all the targeted online research. And also has an indexed copy of the darknet of the specific forums that we can crawl to see if somebody's active there. Our academic partner is DFKI, the German Research Institute for Artificial Intelligence. I think even the BKA is a shareholder of DFKI at the moment. And they guide us in doing the right things with artificial intelligence. And during the project, we started off with the Dutch police, the Belgian police as users of AviaTor. Meanwhile, we have 15 users. And also Kantonspolizei Zurich is testing with the system. But we have users ranging from the Emirates, India, Sweden. We have 13 European users and 15 overall. So the project was started in 2019. It ended in 2021. But luckily, the European Union gave us a second round of funding to continue working on the project for another 3 years. And there's a reason for that, because I explained about the law that is implemented in America. In Europe, there will be a similar law. So over the next 2 years, the law will be signed, I think, next month. But over the coming 2 years, also in Europe, providers will have mandatory reporting. So if they encounter illegal content on their platforms, they have to report. So the European Union will start an agency for that, comparable to NECMEC. And since about 75% of all illegal content is hosted in Europe, the reports is about to explode. So the European Commission is investing in this system. We can go on for another 3 years. And we focus on a number of areas. We focus on making sure AviaTor is functionally complete and sustainable. We will develop additional AI. I will come to that in a minute. And to mention another important thing, we also do a legal review in to which extent it's legal that the police acts on the reports that come from public bodies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, etc. And we also have, because we have a number of users already across Europe, we organize every half year peer-to-peer learning sessions where police talks to each other on best ways to process the reports, on how to calculate risk scores, and that's done by the police. We're not involved in that. So another 3 years of interesting development, and we committed to having about 25 law enforcement agencies on board by the end of the project. And one of them will be Interpol. Interpol will start processing reports for countries that don't do that themselves, and they will then distribute the outcome to the country so that they can take action. There will also be a direct connection to the X database from Interpol that contains all the victim information from child abuse. And I see that I have to hurry up a little bit here because Daniel is standing up. I'm not as punktlich as most Germans, by the way. That is a little thing about the Dutch. So interesting project going on for another 3 years. What we're going to do in AI, we're also going to develop classifiers for text, because often you have the illegal content in the images, but in the related chats, you can determine whether it's just stupid peer-to-peer behavior of 12-year-olds that are communicating to each other, or whether there's an adult coercing the behavior, which is a serious crime, of course. And the police will react different to that. The classifier we will increase in capacity. At this moment, it's about 86% accurate to determine whether something is illegal or not illegal. And we will also integrate a number of other things like face detection. To run AviaTor in your agency, it's important that you process these reports, because if you don't do that, the system doesn't make sense. And the software is for free. It's European funded. You will never have to pay for it. Only the hardware that you need to run it, you should, of course, buy. And it's relatively modest hardware. So, ambitious project, and we hope to continue 3 years, get a lot more law enforcement on board. Again, it's not a commercial project for us, but it's an extremely rewarding project, because the agencies we face, they sometimes work without any software to do this tough job. And it is a burdening job for the investigators. So the more we can automate, the better it is for the victims, but for the investigators, and of course for the perpetrators going behind the bars. So that's my story of the project. It's a little bit different from the previous presentation, because it's really an applied AI, I would say, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Ja, das Mikrofon ist bereit. Wem darf ich es reichen? Sonst habe ich schon einen kleinen Eis. Bitte schön.
Thank you. I have several questions. The beginning is the NECMEC reports. You said that all the data providers have to report. Do they have to report because they are based in the US? So when the EU will have the new law, will Facebook be obliged to report in the EU, or are they still reporting in the US? So all this non-US based social media channels which can have abusive content, are they also included in this NECMEC reports?
At the moment, what's included in the NECMEC reports are the reports from the American providers. Mm-hmm. So it's an American law, and they have. So if they see on their platforms there, they report. Mm-hmm. But most of the information is in America. The new law is a European law, and that will apply to European providers and data hosted in Europe.
Oh, okay. And then did you thought about advancing this kind of AI tech?
Yeah.
Not only to child abuse, but there is like human trafficking, stuff like that, which is also picture and video based. Mm-hmm. So this could be a bigger fish to fry, not only.
Yeah, and I said, Robert already said that, so AI is not a magic tool. And if you want to have a good classifier, you have to train it on the data that you will encounter in real life situations. So for training the classifier, we put a training station at the headquarters of the Dutch police. They made a large training set and they basically divided it in illegal images and in not illegal images. So we trained the classifier with those data sets. So what our classifier can do is make a distinction between illegal and not illegal, which is important for this process. But what we're going to do in the next project, which we're running now, is making it more granular. So being also able to determine the severity of the abuse, for instance. In order to do so, you have to have labeled data sets, so composed by the police, saying this set of images is this material, that is that material. And then you can train your classifier. The problem there is that the police is so unimaginably busy that they don't have time to do this. So it's a bit, we're a bit caught between a rock and a hard stone there. In the project we have 400 police days where they will, what you call, annotate data sets with which we can train the classifier to be better than it is now. If we don't have the data, all our technology goes to waste because we can't do anything with it. So that's, you have to train on the original data. Other technologies come available now, like CLIP, for instance, is a technology, AI technology, that is trained on common data, and it can be used in situations where you don't train. And it's pretty impressive what it already does. I think it's Twitter or Facebook who built it, but you can ask, for instance, I had a set of 2 million photos. I said, give me a Mercedes 450 SL. And it came up with 5 out of that set. And the way it works is it's trained on everything you find on the internet, and it combines the text that is with the images with what's in the image. So that will be more for investigative purposes. What we do is more for classification purposes. That's 2 different things.
Thank you.
Wir haben noch Zeit für eine Frage. Sonst habe ich noch eine Frage. Wenn es darum geht, mit KI-Mitteln Fahndung zu betreiben, sage ich mal ein bisschen generell, besteht ja auch häufig dann die Befürchtung, dass da diskriminierende Aspekte reinkommen. Ich glaube, es gibt so Beispiele von amerikanischen Systemen, wo halt die Trefferquote bei Dunkelhäutigen höher war als bei anderen, oder? Habt ihr diese Befürchtung auch schon gehört, dass das System vielleicht nicht gerecht da beurteilt?
Well, you have to, one thing, if you train classifiers, you have to be very specific on where you want to train them for, and you have to make sure that the data set you use is sufficiently specific and unbiased. And that is a big problem. So in our case here, we just asked the police, give us from the actual reports you do, give the images there, so it's what was in the report. So we don't create a bias there, but it's a real problem. I admit that, to make an unbiased classifier. And therefore you hear nowadays things like explainable AI, where once something is classified, you can also see why it was classified like that, so that you can start correcting the outcomes.
Eine letzte Frage, aber das geht vielleicht ins Publikum der Fachleute. Diese Berichte, die wir jetzt gehört haben, die sind 30 Millionen oder ein paar Hunderttausende vielleicht für die Schweiz. Wo kommen die bei uns rein in der Schweiz?
Bei der FedPol.
Bei FedPol kommt das rein und FedPol verteilt die dann irgendwie in der Schweiz, oder?
Die benutzen momentan ein System, das wir in die vergangene Zeit gemacht haben. Die haben noch nicht dieses System im Gebrauch.
Okay, aber dann muss nicht unbedingt jedes Polizeikorps das auch aufbauen, dann kann das vielleicht in der Schweiz FedPol sein, das diese Aufgabe übernimmt.
Yeah, it's in situations where there's a federated police, a federal police, in the ideal world, the reports come in in the federal office, and they distribute based on in which region the reports are, and then the region can process the reports with, for instance, the AviaTor system. So again, there's no cost, so it doesn't matter how many systems you install. It's more the logistic has to be good.
Gut, also ich glaube, wir haben einen Auftrag, dieses gute Ding in unsere Polizeilandschaft zu verteilen. Ich glaube eben, wann gibt es schon etwas gratis, das erst noch gut ist. Oder? Genau. Vielen herzlichen Dank für den Vortrag, war sehr spannend und